Part of our policing role within roads policing is policing the fatal four, which is speeding, mobile phones, drink and drug driving and not wearing your seatbelt. Those offences kind of cause the most times when people are either seriously injured or killed. I had a vehicle come towards me, which was obviously speeding, so I changed the device onto that vehicle, to which I detected it was doing 55 mile an hour in a 30. So one of our key offences for causing collisions is speed. So I put my hand up, got it to stop. The minute I put my head in the window, whiskey hit my face straight away, and I looked at his eyes and I knew he was drunk, and then he immediately said sorry. He's blown 71 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just before school kick-out time. On one occasion, I was sent to a call of a collision, car versus pedestrian. 3 cars in the middle of the road. One was on fire, one was seriously damaged, and then there was a pedestrian on the floor. The driver had lost concentration behind the wheel and drifted across the road, and this young man was walking along the footpath with his father. We get the update, say another hour later, that he's not going to survive. And that is the one thing for me, is the reason why I am quite unforgiving in my fatal 4 offences.
Welcome to More Than the Badge, a Kent Police podcast. My name is PC Melissa Marsh, and I will be your host. Today's episode is with PC Peter Ormerod, a police officer in our roads policing department. Welcome to the podcast, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
What's inspired you to become a police officer?
When I was a very small boy, I was with my parents at an event. I was very young at the time, maybe about 4 or 5 years of age, and I don't remember too much, but what I do remember is I remember looking up at the sky, because it was fireworks, I think, or something like that. And the next thing I knew, my parents weren't next to me anymore. So I was a lost little boy, essentially, and crying and all sorts of stuff, which you would expect from a child. And then the next thing I kind of remember all the experience is a police officer coming down to me and taking hold of me, essentially, and then not too long after finding my parents. So they became sort of my heroes at a very young age. And from that point onwards, the seed had been set by that event to become a police officer, essentially, because they were kind of like, oh, well, they found my parents out of nothing, really, which was really cool from a young boy's point of view. So that's kind of one thing that inspired me to become a police officer, essentially, is to have that same impact on someone else, potentially.
Lovely. So you've essentially started like every police officer. We start on the LPT, so local policing team. How long did you stay on the local policing team before you went into the roads policing department?
I started policing in April 2005. And my first 12 months was in Medway with the development teams there as a probationer. And then I was posted to my team at Gravesend in 2006 and stayed there until late 2018. So I did around about 13 years on what response, or LPT is called now, or your response teams, as to many 999 calls.
So the roads policing department is obviously our traffic department. What does that entail?
Part of our policing role within roads policing is policing the fatal four, which is speeding, mobile phones, drink and drug driving and not wearing your seatbelt. So part of that is over periods of the year we have operations, and then over the period of December we have what's called op limit. So we have taskings to basically conduct speed checks in areas that we know we can do it. So an example was me and my colleague conducted a speed check in a 30 mile an hour area with a speed detection device. So with that we have to check that it's working, which we did at the beginning of the shift as per normal, and then get to our site. So I'm stood there in my reflective jacket, clear and obvious to people, in a 30 mile an hour limit, and I had a vehicle come towards me, which was obviously speeding, so I changed the device onto that vehicle, to which I detected it was doing 55 mile an hour in a 30. So one of our key offences for causing collisions is speed. So I put my hand up, got it to stop, and I always usually go up to the passenger side window because it's a little bit safer in case they decide they don't want to stay anymore.
The last thing.
Indeed. He lowered the window, and the minute I put my head in the window, whiskey hit my face straight away, and I looked at his eyes and I knew straight away he was drunk. So I tell him to turn the engine off and walk around the car. What have you had to drink today? And then he immediately said sorry. To which I then got the breath test kit at the roadside, assembled it, did my usual requirements at the roadside, and he's blown 71 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, just before school kick-out time. And yeah, got him into custody. He's blown over the limit and he's now facing court time. So that's one example of a simple road check for a speeding offence has led to getting someone, again, that could have seriously injured or killed someone off the roads. And then a good example of mobile phones and how it loses your concentration so much at the road is we saw a car on the motorway that was weaving slightly left and right and going a little bit lower than the speed limit, and we're in our larger marked cars, blue and white stripings on the side, police on the bonnet, blue lights on the top, and obviously it says Kent Police, or there's police on the side. And I said to my colleague, as I was passenger, they might be on the phone, we might want to have a look. And lo and behold, we just creeped up to the side of it, had the body worn ready, hit record, and lo and behold, we're literally next to each other on the motorway at 55 miles an hour. I'm literally body worn by the window, watching them go through WhatsApp, texting away for probably a good 35, 45 seconds. To which at that point, because they're head up and down, you can imagine at 70, 50 miles an hour, you're travelling within that amount of time, within a minute, potentially about a mile, texting away and not concentrating. And there I am with a body worn video. To which then they've looked right and finally seen the marked car and me recording. And another good example of how much, when you're using your phone, you're not aware of your surroundings at all.
Yeah.
Because all it would have been a quick peripheral look to see, why is that blue and yellow car right next to me?
Only a few seconds.
Yeah, and as I say, 35 to 45 seconds at that speed, you're travelling half a mile to a mile.
Yeah.
With lack of concentration. As a result of obviously seeing that person and that amount of time, that distance that person's driven for, you could be up to 3 to 4 times more likely to be involved in a collision if you're using your phone, because your concentration is just solely texting away or concentrating on the phone. Your head's up and down. So your focus is not on the road, because driving's a complex task. So you're doing 3 or 4 things at once, and if your eyes and your ears and your brain is concentrated on typing as well, because you're doing those 3 or 4 things on that one thing, you're not doing the 3 or 4 things you should be doing. So that's the reason why phones are a big no in my book. Another force had an example on YouTube that they've put a video out where a lorry driver was changing the tracks on his phone or on a device because the music was blaring. He looked down for no more than 5 seconds. The queue of traffic ahead of him had stopped. He ploughed through 3 vehicles pretty much, and unfortunately the first 2 cars were 2 families, and he unfortunately killed, I think it was at least 2 or maybe even 3 or 4 children in the car as a result of him just literally not concentrating and doing that with his phone. So I will be very unapologetic when I see people on the phone. If you are risking it, don't do it, because your lack of concentration, again, could be your liberty and your life. Put it in airplane mode and put it in the glove box, and don't look at it again till you get out of the car, is my advice.
It's like I said, with the airline industry, if the pilot had autopilot, didn't have autopilot, you wouldn't want him texting on the phone.
Yeah, of course.
Because he's responsible for so many lives.
Exactly.
So you are the pilot of your own vehicle.
Yeah, I always say that driving is not automatic. It's a privilege, because you gain your license, you have to spend money. You pay insurance and things like that. It's a privilege, and if you treat it like a privilege every time you get in that vehicle, because essentially, without saying it, that vehicle is a ton or so of weapon potentially at times, and if you get it wrong, it can have really poor consequences for you and others. So treat it like it's a privilege every time you get in it, that you're driving that car and not a chore. Concentrate on what you're doing. For us, those offences kind of cause the most times when people are either seriously injured or killed. And on one occasion, I was sent to a call of a collision, car versus pedestrian. And we as a team got there, and unfortunately, when we got there, with anything, you kind of get there and you kind of get a gut feeling straight away when you arrive on scene to what you've got. So we had 3 cars in the middle of the road. One was on fire, one was seriously damaged, and then there was a pedestrian on the floor. And I pretty much knew when I arrived, looking at how they were and their injuries, that it was very, very serious. And you kind of get that vibe as well when you've got the ambulance service on scene and they are seriously frantic. And you've then got a parent, a father. You work out quite quickly the patient on the floor is a very young man, best way of describing it. And his dad is literally in bits. So we managed to kind of control the scene the best we could. We managed to very quickly establish who the suspected driver who caused the collision was and start our processes with that person. We managed to get Dad in a car, and the patient, should we say, was taken to King's very quickly by land. So then we get the update, say another hour later, that he's not going to survive. And then we have a department called the Serious Collision Investigation Unit. They've come along, taken over the scene and conducted their forensic investigation, essentially, of the scene. And we've done our bits with the driver. And unfortunately, the young man was passed away. Throughout all the months afterwards in the investigation that followed, it transpired that the driver had lost concentration behind the wheel and drifted across the road. And this young man was walking along the footpath with his father, just innocently, and unfortunately got collected by the car because the driver didn't have any concentration. He come back onto the carriageway and had a head-on with someone else on the crest of a hill, which made obviously the scene quite difficult with the fires and stuff. And that is the one thing for me, is the reason why I am quite unforgiving in my fatal 4 offences. So if I see anything with anyone with a phone, anyone not wearing a seatbelt, drink or drug driving, any poor driving involved like that, I will jump on it and I will enforce it as I see it, because it's important that I try and stop that from happening again to someone else, like again with the drink driver scenario. So that is why we as a unit are quite robust, because it's important that we stop people getting killed on our roads, because we've got this Vision Zero approach that by a certain time and a certain date we hope that no one is seriously injured or killed on our roads, and that's kind of the aim of what roads policing is.
Of course, it's when you learn to drive, you're not trained to drive without a seatbelt. You're not trained to drive on your mobile phone.
Yeah.
You're not trained to drive drinking.
No.
And it's like back when I was flying, we always said that 1 shot is equivalent to 2.
Yes.
You're 2 times more likely to get inebriated quickly. Do you have examples like that in regards to the 4 factors?
Yeah, I mean, we do get a lot of morning afters, I think is the best way of describing them. And people will be leaving pubs. People will be going to places in the morning where people might have been drinking the night before. And I hope that people go to pubs with the intention of not driving and expect us to be waiting for you, because there are times that I have and caught people. And I always say, if you intend on drinking at all, do not drive. Yes, there is a limit, but my advice is that if you are intending on drinking at all, do not get behind the wheel, because you're leaving yourself open to making a mistake, because your reaction speeds won't be the same and causing that collision. Because even though you might be under the limit, there is another offence that you can be prosecuted for, such as driving whilst impaired. So you can have a certain amount of something in your system and still be committing offences. So you could have 1 beer, we can see you driving poorly, and then we can request you take part in a field impairment test. And you could perform poorly during that field impairment test. And that is part of another offence under the Road Traffic Act for driving whilst impaired. And we can then prosecute you, take you to court and show the court that even though, yes, you were under a limit, you were still driving poorly because you had an element of a drug or alcohol in your system. And that can be any drug. That could be medication, illicit, anything that's in your system can affect your driving. Because we find on road policing, it's not just your typical street drugs that make you drive poorly. It could be any medication that you take too much of and things like that.
Yeah. I think my message to members of the public that are drinking alcohol and do get behind the wheel is please stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah, just don't do it.
Because consider the lives that are in the car with you, not only the other lives that are surrounding you.
Because it's not only just other people's lives that are on the line, it's your own liberty as well, essentially.
Yeah.
You're risking everything when you get behind the wheel whilst intoxicated by anything. If you're involved in a crash and you seriously injure someone, that, someone breaks a leg or is even worse killed, that's prison time. There's no qualms about it. And obviously with the change in the sentencing guidelines recently, we're seeing much higher sentences now for fatal road traffic collisions, which is encouraging in the hope that it stops people doing what they find is acceptable when it's not.
That's your main focus, but I think I've pretty much seen a few of you come to local policing team jobs as well. Is that a regular or is that...
We do support local policing teams in all sorts of stuff. We've got all sorts of equipment in the cars, so we can support at serious collisions or even fatal collisions, because part of our response role is, if there is a fatal collision, to come to the scene and help in the evidence capture, because obviously we're all trained with field impairment testing, eyesight testing, roadside drug testing, breath tests, and all those sort of extras to try and determine or gather the evidence to suggest or not suggest if the result of the collision is because of one of those 4 things that I mentioned earlier.
And then as you specialise in this role now, what is your work-life balance like? So
we work on a very similar pattern to the local policing team. So we do 6 shifts on, 4 days off. So we end up doing 2 earlys, 2 lates and 2 nights. And with that, we'd have 4 days off afterwards, which I find is probably the best shift pattern we've had in policing for a good while.
And through your year's experience, how do you switch off from certain jobs that may be difficult for you?
So for me, it's all about mountain biking for me. I'd love getting out, just go out on the bike for a good couple of hours and just switch off completely. For me, there's nothing like going down a trail on your mountain bike at, say, 15, 20 mile an hour, going off little rock jumps and stuff and just completely switching off from the world. It's great.
I can relate. I used to do mountain biking back in Africa and going through all the muddy patches where you're waist high in mud.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good release, but it's been a while since I've gotten back into that here in the UK.
Oh, you need to. There's nothing like the wind in your hair, or as I say, the wind in my pano roof, should we say, because it's not exactly there anymore, getting a little bit older. But yeah,
Take
no, it's
off
great.
The helmet, you've got mud patches everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's fantastic fun.
So, has there been a moment in your career that's really stayed with you?
Yeah, there's many, I have to say, because unfortunately at times we come across things in not the greatest times of people's lives. However, sort of the big one for me was essentially trying to deploy Stinger, which was successful, but unfortunately for me, it caused me to get hit by a car and get injured as a result. And it wasn't for me the recovery from the injury that was the problem. It was the recovery mentally from that, which caused a little bit of angst. However, the support I got from teams, departments within policing was fantastic, and also charities outside of policing as well. So that really did help with my mental recovery, because the physical recovery was pretty simple, even though my leg was broken and bumps and bruises all over the shop. It was more the mental recovery I needed help with than anything else.
Yeah, it takes quite a few bit of months to heal mentally.
Yeah, quite a few years, yeah. It was more, for me, it was reliving it again and again and again with sort of just random moments of your day. Putting yourself back to where you were when you got injured was pretty difficult. And it's taken some time to reflect on that and have the right processes to put myself in my mind that I am safe when these flashbacks occur. And now, after years of after it happening, it's much easier to deal with.
What were the support services that you used going through that?
For me, it was the first step for me was self-referring myself to the welfare services within Kent Police, because we have a department where we have a lot of police staff that can help us with mental recovery, I think is the best way of putting it. For me, it was making that referral to say, I know something's not right, can you help me? Was kind of like the first step. And the first step was I got a phone call, and they run through an assessment with me, essentially over the phone, asking me preloaded questions that I wasn't aware of to get the answers that they needed to make an assessment of how I was. And from that, a week later, I had a face-to-face with a member of staff who was trained to look after me, basically, and put me through a process that made me feel safe, that what I was experiencing was normal, and that I could recover from it, basically, is the best way of putting it.
What help would you give to officers in a similar predicament that have gone through that recently? Say, with nearly being hit by a car, for incidents like that, what would you give them as advice for future reference?
For me, it's to say that any reaction afterwards is normal. It might not feel normal, but it is, because your body's mentally reacting to trauma, and it's just learning how you react to that. And by asking for help is the first process. I mean, within Kent Police, since I started, it's improved significantly. Even when I did start sort of 19 years ago, it was good then, but now it's so much better, because people are realising now that we as police officers may react to, or the member of the public could come across 5 traumatic incidents in their lifetime. Police officer could go across that in a week or maybe even days. So for me, it's realising that there's something not right and asking for the help. Secondly, it's now trained into colleagues, supervisors, that if you see something's not right, you're able to pull that person away and ask them personally. And if you think something's not right, put the referral in anyway, because then they'll get an email or a call to say you're all right. Because it might be within peers, they don't want to say there's a problem, and they might want to keep it private, which is absolutely fine. And they're then able to get the help without letting anyone know, because sometimes it's a bit bravado type thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes eliminating that helps.
Going back to the 4 factors that you mentioned earlier, what are the things that you look out for as a roads policing officer out on patrol?
For me, I call it professional curiosity. So it's acting on your gut most times when you see something's not right, and being curious as to why, because most of proactive jobs come from just seeing something and going, that doesn't look right. And if it doesn't look right, it's always good to have a good look, stop that car, stop that person, and just ask a few questions. Because mainly, from our point of view, if you're willing not to wear your seatbelt, for instance, and it's something quite simple, for us, you're more likely to commit other offences as a top of not wearing that seatbelt. And it's usually good, because if not wearing a seatbelt, it's usually, it's just not wearing a seatbelt, but usually it will lead to other things. And it's such as simple as things like that. We've got drug drivers off the roads just because of somebody just being eyeful to the fact that someone's not wearing a seatbelt. Or the other day when I had someone drive past in the opposite direction and just looked a bit weird at me, like, and it just screamed to me, stop me. And it was just that reaction. And lo and behold, 10 minutes later, he's in custody for drug driving. We've got a piece of cannabis. Just from a simple look at someone to say that's not right. And it's just being able to, with your experience, look at that situation and go, yeah, that's not right. We need to do a bit of probing there. And that's usually where most of your jobs come from, really.
Yeah.
Being professionally curious.
Of course. As a human, sometimes we become very complacent and then don't realise the effects thereafter. Oh, well. Has there been a moment which has highlighted the risks associated with police officers working on the front line?
Plenty, but the one that was so spontaneous, should we say, was we had a call outside to a block of flats in my old patch, just to a disturbance. And there was myself with another officer and another single crewed officer, another car. We were literally in convoy and got to the call. So it was essentially disturbance, people fighting outside a block of flats. And we got there, and there was 2 persons. They were having a set to each other by verbals, and the verbals wasn't exactly very accommodating, should we say, to each other. And they quite literally set upon each other right in front of us. So we've grabbed both of us as a team have worked together to grab hold of them, separate them, and get them arrested. And me and my colleague took the main person into custody as such, but we ended up backed into a corner essentially by this communal entrance to a block of flats. So we've got high-rise walls right next to us either side that you can't really get over, and then a communal entrance. So we were boxed in. And then essentially the only way I could describe it is within seconds we were surrounded by a baying mob of drunk people who quite literally didn't appreciate the person that we had in custody. And next minute we've got glass bottles flying in every direction at us. Inside the communal entrance there's a 6'5" fella having a fight with someone else in there, and that person on the floor turned out to be the person we had in custody's partner. And literally you're kind of ducking and diving, glass bottles coming around, and I kind of held onto the radio's emergency button for dear life, and literally kind of sort of begging for help really, because at that moment I thought, are we going to cut one to the head here? Is my colleague going to have to deal with me on the floor completely injured, knocked out or whatever? Colleagues trying to keep one detained and keep the bay mob at bay as such, and it was kind of like, this is a bit of a ticky moment here. But fortunately for us, after that emergency button went off, luckily for us, the police station was 3 minutes away, and it was a changeover time. So night duty were just booking on, and they heard me literally holding onto the radio button, and all I could hear was smashing and shouting, and they came, vans, cars, all sorts come flying along. It was a time for me that sirens were the best thing I've ever heard. And then literally 20 police officers coming out of nowhere was great.
Is there a moment that you remember where you felt really proud about what you and your team do?
Personally, it was probably when I was a probationer. So when I was joining Kent Police and I was going through my training, prior to that I'd worked with someone in the leisure industry, and she'd left the leisure industry before I became a police officer. I moved on to do other jobs before becoming a police officer. So when I was training, I found out she'd been killed in a collision, and one of the predominant parts of that was driver was over the prescribed limit for alcohol or drink driving. And my trainer at the time, my instructor tutor, was very heavily roads policing based. So we'd been practicing roadside breath tests constantly to get through the procedure. And then lo and behold, we were in the Medway area where I was training, and we found a stereotypical drink driver and got them stopped, got them on the breath test kit. They were over, got them back to custody, went through the whole procedure for the first time, and they were over the limit. And we stopped them before they got home or to hurt anyone else. And it was kind of my first point of calling as a police officer, really, that did I stop that person doing something else to another family, if that makes sense? Because obviously I kind of knew that other person personally, and that she was an only child in a family. So that drink driver has destroyed that family's life. Have I just stopped that happening to someone else type thing? And from that point onwards, I kind of found my calling within policing, that I had the opportunity to stop that happening to someone else or someone else's family.
Of course.
And that for me was kind of like a big sort of light bulb moment as to why my career's followed me to where I am now.
Of course. Very, very difficult but special moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you come across any misconceptions in policing, and how would you normally deal with that?
Quite a few. I mean, sort of the main... There's a couple really, is that essentially it's like going back to Pelian principles really. We are the public, and the public are the police, and the police help the public in that sort of sense as that as well. In that we are human beings just trying to do the right thing, essentially. And yes, we can make mistakes every now and then. We don't make them intentionally, and we make them in ways that I've done them before, in the sense that of making a minor mistake here and there, but I do it trying to do the right thing, and it's not necessarily because we're bad people. And not only that as well, we breathe, we bleed, and we act like human beings, and we react to things in certain ways. And also as well, I was having a really bad day once, and then literally some random person left something on the windscreen of the car, and I tweeted about it because I've got access to the Twitter account on Roads Policing, and that day particularly, that item left on that screen never left me, because it's such a bad day, and having that on the windscreen when you're coming out from a random person to say thank you was a really positive thing for me that day. So for me is that, yes, I'd like to say that, yeah, we are human beings and we do get things wrong at times, but we do it with the right intention sometimes, and it's not necessarily because we're doing things that we're wrong intentionally. We're doing it because we're in an extreme situation, or we're not quite going by what we do normally. It's because of the situation that we find ourselves in. We're just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, normal humans, civilly appointed to protect the public.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I mean, the other day I went through a really griefy domestic with a well-known person who regularly gets detained, and he's threatened to put 2 pit bulls against one of my colleagues while we were standing there.
Yeah.
After going to that, we went to look for a high-risk missing person. Halfway through looking for the high-risk missing person, I had a woman go into cardiac arrest. And that day was a really difficult day for me. We went to go and refuel the vehicle, and the nicest thing was a man coming out of the shops with his hands full. He's got his milk, he's got his bread, but he's got a tub of roses that he just passed on, and he just said, "Have a good day, Merry Christmas." And that was just...
moments
just
like
a
that.
relief
to
go through that.
Because as police officers, you tend to see the worst in society most of the time. And with those little touches where you get the best of society, it just kind of reminds you what you're doing is right.
Yeah.
And yeah, because literally at times, like for another instance where you were reminded of the good people in society, is that obviously after dealing with one of the many fatals I've been through, being stood on that cordon, you've got people coming up to you. Can I go through there? No. And I had one particular person who was particularly nasty about that. And I had to kind of repeat myself. To which then when Member of the Public come up afterwards and said, "I'm sorry you've had to deal with that person. Thank you. I will go a different way. Not a problem. Thank you." It just reminds you that faith in people can be restored sometimes after dealing with sort of so many bad people, should we say.
On that note, we'll go into the off-the-cuff questions.
All right, cool.
So going back to when you were a child, say like back in school when the teacher asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What was your dream job?
This, pretty much. It's always been my thing. Ever since that moment when I was a child, my parents have always had it kind of installed in me, running around in uniform, catching the bad people. It's always been my thing.
Cops and robbers been your best
Exactly,
game?
yeah. A little patrol car when I was a kid, yeah, you name it. Putting a dog in another uniform as well and being a dog handler, yeah. So it's always been the way. Always been the way.
You're in the right department now.
Exactly.
Tell us something that is currently on your bucket list.
For me, it's got to be Route 66 across America. Only done probably about 1% of it, but like to do the whole thing. And there's other things on the mountain bike as well, sort of going out to Austria or Europe on the major trails like the major sort of hardcore riders do. That would be another thing as well, definitely.
Sounds good. If you had a celebrity that could join you on the shift,
yeah, go on.
Who would it be?
Paddy McGuinness all day long. Absolute fun. You would not have a moment without a bit of laughter.
Yeah.
That'd be perfect for me. Especially fellow Northerner as well, because I come from that neck of the woods that he used to live in pretty much as well. So talk about the good old days as well while you're patrolling and then having a crack about stuff would be awesome.
What do you think his go-to saying might be when you're responding to the job?
All Bayek, the old northern things, yeah.
And one thing that you wish the public knew about police officers?
I would say definitely that we act off your information, and it might be when you put it in you don't get a response, but we do act upon it, I would say.
Take some time, further investigation.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, especially if you're telling us about something like a drug driver or something like that. There's reasons why we don't tell you what the result is sometimes, and that's kind of to protect you or the information that you give. So it might not be you get a result, but any information you give to us is seen, heard, and acted upon if we can.
So going back to your childhood dream, the role you've now specialised in, and the experience that you've had throughout the years, what advice would you give someone who's looking to join the career?
I would say being a police officer, 95% of it is using your voice. So if you're in a role that deals with people, the public, in conflict, and also like during complaints and stuff like that, so you get to resolve people's issues, I would say that is probably the key skill. Everything else you will be trained on how to do, I would say, is going to be sort of the key thing. But communication is absolutely key. That will get you out of most situations and trouble and help people the most. Being able to get to someone on the same level as them is absolutely key.
Perfect. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook and LinkedIn, where we'll be posting previews of our upcoming episodes. You can watch this episode on our YouTube channel and find out more about the variety of opportunities available by searching Kent Police Careers.